Hello everyone. This is the CircuitPython weekly meeting for November 2nd, 2020. It's the time of week where we get together to talk about all things CircuitPython. I'm Jeff Epler and I'm sponsored by Adafruit to work on CircuitPython. CircuitPython is a version of Python designed to run on tiny computers called microcontrollers. Development of CircuitPython is primarily sponsored by Adafruit, so support them and us by purchasing your hardware from adafruit.com. This meeting is hosted on the Adafruit Discord server. You can join anytime by going to adafru.it/discord. We hold the meeting in the CircuitPython text channel and in the CircuitPython voice channel. This meeting typically happens on Mondays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, but the date occasionally varies for U.S. holidays. We have an online calendar. If you would like to speak in the meetings, let us know and we will add you to the CircuitPythonistas role. This will also get you a small number of notifications from Discord during the week, mostly reminders about the meeting. The length of the meeting varies, but it's often from 60 to 90 minutes long. We'll post the meeting on YouTube and other podcast services. If you find this podcast is not available on your favorite podcast service, let us know. The meeting includes the text in the text channel and the audio from the audio channel. This meeting is accompanied by a notes document. If you wish to participate but don't have a mic or just prefer not to have your voice recorded, you can add your updates to the notes doc and we'll read them off. If you can't attend it at all, you can also leave your notes in advance and likewise we'll read them for you. This document is updated with time codes so that if you want to watch or listen to just a part of the meeting after the fact, you can skip to what you're interested in. This meeting is held in 5 parts. First, community news with links to CircuitPython projects and a preview of the Python on Hardware newsletter. Second, the state of CircuitPython, libraries, and Blinka. We'll look at numbers that summarize the health of the project and get a high-level summary of recent development and future direction. Third, and the first of 2 round-robin sections, Hug Reports. In Hug Reports, we invite you to highlight positive contributions from the awesome folks around us. In the round-robin sections, we'll start with the moderator and continue in alphabetical fashion until everyone has had a chance to speak. If you're lurking, we'll skip over you. If you have notes, the moderator will read them aloud. Fourth, status updates. During status updates, we invite community members to take a few minutes to talk about their CircuitPython related work, progress, and plans. Feel free to chime in with quick tips or advice as appropriate. But for longer discussions, you should take them to our last section, In the Weeds. For topics that are more open-ended, this is the section where we can discuss them. If you have anything else you'd like to discuss, please add it to the end of the In the Weeds section of the notes document as soon as you think of it, and tag it with your name so we'll know who's starting the discussion. We cover topics in the weeds in the order that they were added to the document. If you'd like to participate in the round-robin sections, you need to be a member of the CircuitPythonistas role on Discord, just ask, and you'll need to add your name, and preferably your notes, it's super helpful, to the weekly meeting document in alphabetical order just under Hug Reports and status updates. And once again, if you can't attend or prefer to have us read your notes for you, we're happy to. Just put that in the notes. Except when you're actively speaking, please keep your mic muted. I'm going to assume that anybody who hasn't had a chance to at least add their name to the notes document is lurking. If for some reason that's not possible, though, you can let us know in the text channel that you'll be participating, and our intrepid notes taker will add you to the document. With that, let's continue to community news. That's so nice. All right. So first up, the new Raspberry Pi 400 computer is released. The Raspberry Pi Foundation announced yesterday that the new Raspberry Pi 400 desktop computer, there's L'Amour. There it is. It's all built into the keyboard, and the ports all come out the back. It's really making me think of the Commodore 64 of my childhood. This is a great CircuitPython/Blinka machine, plus it has all the GPIO pins for hacking, and there's plenty of links to back that up. Very exciting. Microlab 1.0.0 has been released by community member Zoltan V923Z. Microlab provides numerical capabilities similar to the Numpy library, but Microlab is usable on limited resources microcontrollers. This release implements a number of missing features, like higher dimensional tensors, proper views of arrays, and broadcasting. In addition, a bunch of new functions have been added as well as customization options. Next up, an update for Python in Visual Studio Code. The October 2020 release of the Python in Visual Studio Code extension is available. You can download the Python extension from the Windows Marketplace or install it directly from the extension gallery in Visual Studio Code. This is a short release where we addressed 14 issues, and it includes DebugPy 1.0. DebugPy offers a number of great features that can help you understand bugs, errors, and unexpected behavior in your code. Grayscale ePaper support has been added to CircuitPython. And here we have a Twitter by Joey Castillo showing the new capability. Joey is the inventor of the Open Book e-reader. Next up, Slappy.io is an easy-to-use web development environment for CircuitPython. So imagine doing everything you do with CircuitPython, but you never have to leave your browser. Next up, the CircuitPython sensor ring. Another Joey Castillo item. Expanding on previous postings, the article discusses adding sensors and dot star RGB LEDs, design decisions, and directions for future work. That's all on Hackster.io. Here we've got someone who's showing off their build of the AdaBox. Quote, when I gave CircuitPython a shot, it was amazing. Along with Mu, the simple Python text editor, I was up and running in no time. Mu recognized that I was using CircuitPython, and once I enabled serial communication to help find the stupid syntax errors I often make, I was up and running. I hadn't bought into the not compiling saves time argument, but it does turn out to be a nice feature to click save and watch my screen update. And that's from Bob the Chemist. All right, someone can correct me on the pronunciation, but next we have making a heart of Te Fiti from Moana, and also a Tony Stark arc reactor. And we've got Twitter links for that. And let's see, last but not least, Scott Young on Twitter. Me and Fina, age 4, collaborated on this to scare the wife yesterday. An Adafruit Halloween M4, some photos, a bit of sound manipulation, and a bit of mucking around in CircuitPython, and we came up with something well creepy. So these are just a few things that will come out in the CircuitPython weekly newsletter tomorrow. The complete archives, as well as the subscribe button, are on adafruitdaily.com. To contribute your own news or project, edit next week's draft on GitHub and submit a pull request with the changes. You can also tag @engineer on Twitter or email anb@adafruit.com. And that wraps it up for the community news. Next up is the state of CircuitPython, the libraries, and Blinka. This is kind of a numbers approach to monitoring the health of the project, but we'll also kind of give a little narrative to explain how things are going in the core, the libraries, and Blinka. So overall, in the past 7 days, we had 35 pull requests merged from 23 authors, which is a huge number. Thank you to all 23 of them. Some names that I don't recognize. Michael Lass is, I think, a past contributor, but not frequent. Fede2CR, it's nice to see you. Adam Kumick, I don't recognize the name of. TWA127, ITACA Innovation, Marcus K, M. Tuara, D. Manella. Let's see, BD34N has been around. Ben Lewis, they may be new. And we also had 10 reviewers, which is great because reviewers are what enable us to incorporate pull requests and improve the software. So thank you to Foamy Guy, Maker Melissa, Carter, D. Halbert, Lady Ada, Sedacious, myself, Jerry, Katney, and Tanut. On the issues front, we had 24 closed issues by 9 people and 13 open by 13 people. Being net down 11 issues is actually pretty amazing. And this says removed Hacktoberfest label from 0 issues. That's either incorrect or irrelevant. And with that, I will turn it over to Scott if he is willing to tell us about the core.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. Okay, for the stats for the core, we had 8 pull requests merged from 7 different authors. Most look familiar to me, so thank you to those 7. We had 4 reviewers, so thanks again to reviewers. We have 16 open pull requests, 3 of which are older than 100 days. So we should take a look at those. I think one is the IMX 1050 that needs some love and just has not been a priority. So we should just remember that it's totally okay for us to close PRs. We can always open them later. The branches do not go away unless you delete them separately. So we should always consider that if we have things that we just don't have the time to do. Issues-wise, we had 10 closed issues by one person, 1 open by one person, for a net down 9, which is awesome. And I think that one person who closed the issues was Dan over the weekend. So thanks to Dan for that, I believe. We have a total of 321 open issues. You can go to github.com/adafruit/circuitpython/issues to see them all. We track kind of the state of our issues by milestone, and we have 0 issues not assigned to milestone, so we're caught up on triage. And we also have 0 open issues under the 600 milestone, which is a good sign, and I think Dan will talk about later. But just as a preview for the overview overall, we're getting really close to getting another release candidate for 6.0 out the door, and soon we'll also have a stable release of 6.0 out the door. Once we get that stable release, we can expect a few bugs to come in as more people try it. So that's nothing too surprising. But we'll also be able to get out a pre-release of 6.1, which I think people will be very excited about, because all the changes that have been going into main recently will be released as a 6.1 pre-release instead. So that'll be really good, and I think that's a forcing function for us to get 6.0 stable. Anyway, that's it for the core.
Thank you, Scott. And for the overview of the libraries, I will pass on to Kattni.
Thanks, Jeff. So we had 24 pull requests merged, and this is across all of the Adafruit CircuitPython libraries. So all libraries that have Adafruit_CircuitPython_ before the library name. So 24 pull requests merged by 13 authors, including a number of the new folks that you read off earlier, and 9 reviewers. The oldest pull request we had merged was 157 days old, which is excellent. Beyond that was 1 at 18 days, 2 at 4, and then the rest were at 0 or 1 days. So it's good that we're keeping caught up, but it's excellent that we're getting a chance to get to some older pull requests. We had 12 issues closed by 7 people and 11 opened by 11 people, leaving us with 221 open issues. We have 9 good first issues amongst those, and our total of pull requests right now is 29. There were 2 new libraries this week, LC709203F and EMC2101. If you are interested in contributing to CircuitPython, contributing to the libraries is a great way to start. You can go to circuitpython.org/contributing and find all the information that I've read off. There's a list of open pull requests, a list of open issues, and a list of library infrastructure issues. The issues place, you can search by label. If you are new to everything, good first issues are a great place to start. If you're looking for something more complicated, you can search for bug or enhancement. Reviewing PRs is also super helpful. You can take a look, see if you have the hardware, you can actually test the PR. If you don't have the hardware, you can always scan it for syntax, code structure, that sort of thing, and just let us know, leave a comment and let us know that you reviewed it. Reviewing is often the bottleneck for getting things through. So it's super helpful to help out that way. And we are always available to help you out. If you're new to Git and GitHub, we have a guide, or you can find us on Discord or through the GitHub issue, and we can help you out, because we want to see you be able to contribute in the way that works for you. Overall, the libraries are continuing to grow, as we see by the 2 new libraries this week, and I know there was at least 1 or 2 last week as well. I'm really excited to see some community contributed libraries to the main bundle. That's always excellent as well, and much appreciated. And we are seeing updates to the community bundle. The community bundle is definitely becoming more active, which is also excellent. Those are libraries that are written by community members that don't necessarily work for Adafruit support, but we want folks to be able to get to them. So we set up the community bundle, and that's available, and people have been adding to and updating the current libraries included. And that's where we are with the libraries.
Thank you, Kattni. And the last section in the state of CircuitPython is Blinka. So I'll turn it over to Maker Melissa.
Hello, Blinka is our CircuitPython compatibility layer for Raspberry Pi and other single-board computers. This week we had 3 pull requests merged by 3 authors. It's D. Manla, Michael Lass, and TWA127. And we had 1 reviewer, myself. We have 2 open pull requests left, and there were 2 closed issues by 2 people and 1 open by 1 person. We removed the Hacktoberfest label from 0 issues. There are currently 27 open issues. There were 1,657 PyPI downloads in the last week, and we currently have 52 supported boards according to this, but I need to add a few more to the CircuitPython.org website, and that number should be up next week. And that's it.
And is it true that the Pi 400 will be compatible with Blinka?
Eventually, I don't know if it is now or not.
All right. I'm sure we'll get one of those into your hands real soon now.
Okay.
All right. With that, we will move on to the first round-robin section of Hug Reports. During Hug Reports, we invite you to take some time to thank people in the community, especially the Discord community, for the great stuff that they're doing to support each other. I will kick it off, then we will go down the list in alphabetical order, wrapping around to the top, and giving everyone a chance to speak. And just a reminder, if you have not added your name to the document, I will assume that you are lurking and skip over you. So I will take my own time code, and I will start with a group hug. Also a hug to Dan for plugging away at the last few things that are blocking version 6.0.0. To Jerry for doing some testing related to a USB bug I was seeing on ESP32S2. And to the Discord moderators for dealing with a few things over the past week. It's nothing like the days when we were in server discovery, but it's still a little bit of an uptick. Jerry's next, and then after that is Katney.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks to Ask Patrick W. for some guidance in trying to update the ESP32S2 certificates. Understanding how things work. And Kevin Thomas for doing some confirming some errors that I've been chasing around this morning and making me feel at least like I'm not alone. And the group hug, everybody.
All right, thank you, Jerry. After Katney, I will be reading notes from Kevin Thomas. Go ahead, Katney.
Thank you. So first and foremost, a hug report to John Park for the most amazing AdaBox unboxing
Yes.
ever. I'm well convinced there's no topping it. So great job with that. Not to mention all the work that goes into preparing for it. Just utterly amazing. To Adafruit and to Phil especially for always going above and beyond to look out for the health of their people. Hug report to Foamy Guy for adding his first library to the bundle and for writing the library in the first place, sorting out releasing it properly, and for everything he does with regards to the libraries. I really appreciate the assistance. Basically, if ever there's something that needs to be done, he's always willing and able to do it, and I really appreciate that. To community moderators for keeping up with issues on Discord, and a group hug to everyone.
All right, thank you, Katney. After I read the notes from Kevin Thomas, we will go on to Maker Melissa. But Kevin writes, a hug to Foamy Guy, Jerry, Tanut for helping me get the Metro ESP32S2 Adafruit request module working with the Wi-Fi module to connect properly. And then to Anecdata and Jerry for spending their morning helping me get set up to flash the Metro ESP32S2 properly. Mark is up next, but now Maker Melissa, what's up?
Hi, I wanted to give a hug report to TWA127 for adding several boards to Blinka and Platform Detect. Hug report to Anecdata for testing out the CircuitPython request library. To Foamy Guy for working on the Blinka display I/O and working for a fix on an Adabyte issue with adding Blinka to the stats, or more Blinka type repos to the stats. Hug report to Tanut and Lady Ada for a good detailed chat about the CircuitPython request changes. to DGloud for going on show and tell, and John Park for a great AdaBox unboxing.
All right, I have notes from a few people, and then we will go on to Scott. But first, Mark Gamblor sends a group hug. And Mr. Certainly, who is also lurking, says hats off to John Park and the entire AdaBox team for an amazing unboxing video and a group hug. So Zoltan is on deck, but now we go to Scott.
Hello. First, a hug report to Melissa and Lamore for helping me bug hunt the request libraries. I was really hung up on the fact that there was bugs, and it was really good to have some people help me out with that, and I think we got over the majority of them. Thanks to Jerry for testing a core fix that I'll get a PR out for today. Hug report to Microdev for continued work on the ESP32S2 port. The pulse count peripheral looks really neat, and Microdev added both Count.io and Rotary IO support, or is in the process of doing that. And then lastly, a hug report to Zoltan for 1.0 of Microlab.
All right, and that brings us to Zoltan.
Thanks, Jeff. So first of all, I would like to thank Anne Kitty for keeping a tab on the newsletter. Then Taku Fukada, also known as Syscon, for his help with the Microlab documentation. I simply asked for some guidance, and a day later he came back with a full solution, and unfortunately I missed his related pull request, so I simply copied his code from his repository. The upshot being that he didn't get any credit. By voicing my gratitude here sort of fixes this issue. I would also like to thank the contributors to the Microlab stubs, namely Jeff, Scott, and Flamey. I hope that I haven't forgotten anyone. And last but not least, a group hug. So that with that, back to you, Jeff.
Thank you. And wrapping around to the top of the alphabet, I have some notes from C. Grover, who's text only today. Thank you to Dave Estells for display design inspiration for the upgraded workstation corrosion monitor. A hug report to Brent R. for help with PyPortal requests when pushing to AIO feeds. And a hug to John Park for an amazing AdaBox unboxing. And Charles Burniford writes a hug report to all, and that brings us to Christian Walther.
Hello, it's my first time here, so I'm a bit late with this, but I would like to thank Scott and Jeff for providing a very welcoming experience for me as a new contributor with their quick and thoughtful and encouraging pull request reviews.
You're very welcome. And how close was I on the pronunciation of your name?
That was fine.
Okay. All right. With that, we will go to Dan, and then up next, I have some notes to read.
I'd like to thank John Park for his AdaBox 16 unboxing video, which was just hilarious and wonderful, just a delight to watch. Thanks, Jeff, for working with me on those issues over the weekend, where it managed to take us 3 or 4 tries to fix a zip command. But,
It's true.
yeah. I think the point is, like, maybe we should test it before we push this out. And thanks to Scott, Lady Ada, and Melissa, and Jerry for debugging the request library, which is still in process, but they fixed a lot of things already. Very good. And thanks, Zoltan, for congratulations for the 1.00 and 1.10 releases of Microlab. Okay.
All right. After my notes from David, we'll go to Foamy Guy, but David Glaude sends a hug report to Foamy Guy for the Multitasking with CircuitPython Learn Guide. All right, Foamy Guy.
Thanks, Jeff. This week I got a hug for Maker Melissa for all the work on the Blinka Display.io library. I'll talk about it a little more in status update, but definitely would not have been able to accomplish what I did over the weekend without all the great work from Melissa on that. And also for a quick review on a PR with a scaling issue in the group on that library there, Blinka Display.io. Another hug for Dan for helping me with some of the specific configuration details in GitHub and Actions. And then lastly, a big hug to Scott and Kattni, and I'm sure there probably are others, anyone who's worked on the sharing a CircuitPython library guide in the Learn Guide system. I definitely have had that page open a lot over the last week or so, and would not, again, have been able to accomplish what I have without it. So really appreciate all the work that went into that.
All right, thank you. And Hierophect gets to round out hug reports.
Alrighty, so this week, thanks to you, Jeff, and to Scott for your reviews on the SPI peripheral PR that I put through. Thanks to Lady Otter this morning for testing the Neopixel implementation and walking me through some Neopixel purchases that I'm making with Adafruit to make sure that we're covering all of the different use cases for Neopixel on both Arduino and CircuitPython. And thanks to Must Be Art, who is a contributor on the Arduino implementation, who helped to test the new RMT remote control ESP32 implementation of Neopixel on Arduino, and found some issues that are actually both on Arduino and our CircuitPython implementation. So going back and fixing those, but thanks to him for helping to test those and figure them out. And that's it for me.
All right, and that wraps up hug reports. The next section is status updates, which is also conducted in a round robin like hug reports. In status updates, we invite you to tell us what you've been doing with CircuitPython since the last meeting and what you hope to do before the next meeting. So usually covering about a week of time on either side. And we're happy to hear about whatever's going on in your life. For instance, we've heard about deck remodeling projects, which hopefully nobody's remodeling their deck as we enter this cold season. But, tell us what you're up to, what's inspiring you right now. I will start, and we will go in round robin fashion again, so Jerry will follow. So last week, my primary work was on audio out for the ESP32S2, but sadly I didn't make enough progress that it does anything. It was a little bit frustrating, and so I will set that aside for a little bit and return to it if another community member has not picked it up in the meantime. So this week, it's back to the CAN world. Writing some guides and probably also getting another prototype Feather M4 can to replace the one that I fried while working on it a few weeks ago. And soon I have a little Bluetooth project that hopefully will turn into a project guide. It's going to involve the new, not Bluetooth project, it's going to involve the new functionality on Raspberry Pi. So Kattni is on deck, but before that we will go to Jerry.
Thanks. Let's see. So, a forum post. Somebody was trying to use the version 6, the updated RFM 9X and 6.9 builds, and they realized that they could no longer check the battery voltage because we've taken audio I/O out of the, analog I/O out of the builds to make them fit, and that was too bad. So I went back and looked, and I think mostly did a lot of the work that Jeff's done and others to reduce the size of things. There's plenty of room to put analog I/O back in. So we did, and it's in, and it now lets you run that. And cat's trying to break in, and so that was kind of a nice thing. I tried to put Pulse I/O back in, and you can get it for some languages, but not all of them. So I decided to hold off on that. It's not quite enough room for it globally. I got my first Metro ESP32S2 boards. I've been exploring its features and functions, and part of that has been playing with the ESP32S2, the requests on that board, and struggling with a couple of issues that have come up to do with HTTPS requests. And something definitely changed in the most recent version. Things that were requests that were working don't work anymore. So there's been an issue filed on that, and trying to make some sense of it. And again, I'm not sure where the problem is, if it's in CircuitPython or in the requests. There's been a lot of back and forth on that. As part of that too, I've been looking into trying to update the certificates on the ESP32S2 builds. That was a suggestion as being a reason why they're failing HTTPS, some HTTPS requests with an SSL handshake error. but just recently, I finally think I figured out how to do the update, and it turns out I think it's actually being done every time you run a build. So I'm no longer sure why that's not working and quite where to go with that. But that's all in the issue, and keep discussing it there.
All right, thanks, Jerry. It sounds like your plate is full. What's up with you, Katney?
Ask the cat about the request issue.
Yeah, cats know. They won't tell, but they know.
Alright, so last week, I did the pinouts page for the Braincraft hat guide. It turns out there was never a pinouts page added. And that came out of the fact that I was writing the voice bonnet guide and was told to crib the pinouts from a non-existent page. So there is a very detailed, nice pinouts page for the Braincraft hat now, and there is now a full guide for the voice bonnet, including a pinouts page. I did a couple of fritzing objects, but the voice bonnet was the major thing from last week. This week I'm starting the Metro ESP32S2 guide. All the pins are different from everything else we've had, and the install of CircuitPython is totally different too. So I don't know when that's going to be published, but it's being started. So hopefully, if you've got one and you're unsure, we'll have something for you soon. And then I have a few more fritzing objects on my plate, including the new Feather M4 can. And also vaguely on the list, the LPS35HW has a new stemma version, and the guide has sort of been updated, but not entirely. And so if I get to that fritzing, then I will also be getting to that guide. But pretty much this week is the ESP32S2 guide and getting that up and running. And I guess that's it.
All right, sounds like about enough. After the notes from Kevin, we will go back to Maker Melissa. But Kevin Thomas writes, last week I continued working on testing and developing the new Microbit V2, where I created 2 sample applications to test the new onboard speaker capability. The new Microbit V2 is scheduled to be released this month. There are some links related to that in the notes document. This week, I will be attempting to create a tutorial to take advantage of the CircuitPython Metro ESP32S2 showing the use of Adafruit requests and Wi-Fi with a simple example. Special thanks to Jerry, FoamyGuy, Anecdata, and Scott for helping get everything set up properly. Let's see. So after Maker Melissa, I have some notes to read from a few people. Go ahead, Melissa.
Hi, so last week I worked on updating the e-ink breakouts Featherwings guide and added some pinouts and downloads pages. I think they're still being reviewed at the moment. I looked into CircuitPython request library issues and was able to figure out at least one of the issues. I got all the platform detect PRs merged in, so that's all closed out now. I fixed an issue with the Matrix Portal library when positioning of scrolling text wasn't specified. I updated the remaining PyTFT guides with Python install script instructions. I updated Braincraft hat guide downloads page with some missing information. And this week I'm going to be writing a guide for the 128 by 128 grayscale OLED. I'm going to update the Blinka page on CircuitPython.org with some recently added boards. I'll update the e-ink breakouts Featherwings guide with some more e-ink displays. And actually a new item that just popped up is I will be adding the Raspberry Pi 400 to the Blinka today. And that's it.
Nice. All right. I have notes from a few people. After the notes that I read, we will go to Scott. But first, Mark writes, bus device is almost ready for review, tested against the BME 280, I2C, and SPI. That is very nice. Also notes from MicroDev, who is text only. Last week, I worked on implementing rotary I/O and count I/O on the ESP32S2. This week, I plan to add more modules in the ESP32S2 port, which will further enhance its capabilities. So we will have Scott next, and then Zoltan.
Hello. I think at the end of the start of last week, I got the Grayscale e-ink info or PR squared away, and it includes a spy fix for the ESP32S2. I spent some time debugging request slowness that turned out to be that the receive function behaving incorrectly. Thanks again to Lomor and Melissa for helping me with that. Made a bit more progress on the Deep Sleep API on Tuesday, but didn't compile it or anything, just started sketching it out. Today I have to wrap up the receive fix PR, and I am also going to create a single bin for installing the UF2 bootloader on the ESP32S2, since folks want that. And then after that, I'm back to deep sleep when I'm not distracted by the US election, which, yeah, we'll see how it goes. But if you're in the US and you haven't voted, please vote. Voting is something that we can only do every so often, and it's important not to miss it. So, yeah, hopefully I'll get deep sleep compiling and actually kind of working this week.
All right. And yes, vote. Encourage your friends to vote. And yeah, make this happen. All right, we will go to Zoltan, and then I have some notes to read from C. Grover.
Thanks, Jeff. So as announced last week, I finally released 1.0 of Microlab. I have actually in the meantime moved forward, and I am at 1.1.1 at the moment. Each function should increment the minor version, and sub-minors are just, I guess, for bug fixes. This week I would like to work on a bit on cleaning up the code. This is not going to change too much in the API, or it doesn't necessarily mean new functions. I still have to factor out some pieces of code that could be reused for other purposes. I'm trying to close a couple of feature requests. Some of them are relatively straightforward, a bit of work, but straightforward, and some of them are awfully hard, especially that I don't even know what the feature request is about. Some people wanted to have machine learning implemented and things like that, and I think that's really beyond me. So I don't quite know what to do about that. But if anyone has an opinion on the subject, then please go over to the issues section on GitHub and let us know your opinion. And finally, I would like to sort of target smaller microcontrollers. So there are ways of implementing trade-offs. So you can trade speed for flash space and vice versa. And I think it's an interesting subject. I would like to explore that. I don't know how far I get, but at least these are my plans for the week. And with that, back to you, Jeff.
All right. Next, I have notes from C. Grover, who has been chasing some memory issues when using PyPortal, Display.io, and AIO libraries with 600RC and request 1.6.0. Was able to get the corrosion monitor project to work reliably by trimming out some direct Display.io pixel reading and writing. We'll see if I can characterize the errors to be able to submit a useful issue. The next project is the automated DC motor dynamometer. The perfect OshPark PCBs arrived. 2 new feather wings for this project, a 24-bit ADC for dual load cell measurements, and a wing that carries 2 INA 260 breakouts for monitoring power of the test motor and the brake (dynamometer) motor. So that brings us to Christian Walther again, and followed by Dan. Oh, go ahead.
One comment for C. Grover. Try the latest 1.7 requests. It should be better for memory, and we may have fixed the issues with it.
And if we didn't, we need to know.
Yeah. But the reason I made so many changes was trying to save memory, so hopefully that'll help.
All right, over to you, Christian.
All right. I'm still working as I have been for a few weeks on extending the supervisor memory allocator to support movable allocations. That means you can allocate something on the garbage collector heap in one run of the VM, and then it carries over into the next run. And that allows me to implement functionality like specifying which code file to run in the next run, and if one run ends with an exception, storing the exception traceback and accessing that in the next run. And I have the code mostly done for that. I'm now working on cleaning it up and hope to have pull requests ready for review this or next week.
Excellent, thank you. Next up is Dan, and then I have notes from David.
Okay, I fixed a bug where in 6.0.0 where if the host computer went to sleep, the REPL might not reappear. It would type out, but you couldn't type into it. And that was also had to do with serial connection detect and also USB on or off detect. So I fixed that up, and it seems to be working well. Jeff and I worked on fixing the uploading of the CircuitPython stubs to Amazon S3. There was a typo, and then we made a mistake in the zip command, and it just went on and on. So, but it's all done now. There was a minor matrix portal pin error that I fixed. I made up a BLE demo on the matrix portal, which I showed on Show and Tell last week, which was kind of fun. First BLE demo on the airlift of any size. And I'm finishing up the last things for the 6.0 RC1 release today. There's nothing left in the bug queue. I was asked by Lady Ada to make some pin changes in an upcoming product board. I'll probably do that. That's really simple. And then after that, we can do RC1. And I went over, I noticed there were some really old issues that were already covered or were redundant or just not interesting anymore, and I closed about 9 of them, maybe not that many, maybe about 6 over the weekend, just because we have like 300 open issues now, and I'd like to see that number go down. And I've just started doing ESP32S2 development. I got the tool chain working, and I'll start debugging some of the problems we're having. Okay.
All right, I have notes from David Glaude, and then we will go to Foamy Guy. David writes, CircuitPython did the Corona app detector and had a first time on Show and Tell. David asks, does Adafruit still have the As Seen on Show and Tell sticker to put in the next order? And I'm not sure the answer to that. Okay, go ahead.
What you do is just email support@adafruit.com and they'll send you it separately. I don't think you don't need to add it to an order or anything.
All right. And it now runs on an Itsy Bitsy NRF and Feather NRF 52840. And a failure. Attempt to build an airlift with ESP32 dev kit do it. And to permit a different UUID on BLE UART. And there is a link to an issue related to that one. And David's non-CircuitPython activity was to upgrade the Maximite 2 color and play basic version of Gauntlet and Wolfenstein 3D, watching and reading the Raspberry Pi 400 video news all day, and moving from quarantine, hopefully test is negative, to second wave lockdown. Yeah, France has, I forget. No, David's not in France. Anyway, yeah, it's a mess. So we hope that you stay healthy, you and yours. Anyway, we have Foamy Guy and then Hierophect to round out status updates. Belgium, thank you, David. Sorry for calling you French. It's very rude.
Thanks, Jeff. For this week, or last week I should say, probably the most exciting thing is I created a display driver that will let Blinka Display.io output into a Pi game window, so you can run it on a Raspberry Pi or a PC, and it will let you use your Display.io code and see it on the PC or on the Raspberry Pi's HDMI screen. So that was a lot of fun to play with over the weekend. A couple other smaller things. I fixed up an issue that I found while I was working on that with group scaling inside Blinka Display.io. And then I also fixed up a couple other small issues. One was in a learning guide for the Pi ruler. I think it was using the old HID API, and so I got that updated. And then also there was a small one in setup Pi of the image load library I found while I was working on the Blinka stuff as well. Got that fixed. For next week, I'm going to look into the Adabot scripts to try to figure out how to get all of the Blinka stats to show up in the output of those reports that come out of the scripts in that repo. And then I also want to go and test. There's a few more Display.io widgets. I did over this weekend. I did mostly the label, the button, image load. I think that might have been it. So I want to test a couple of the others like progress bar and I know there's a few others I'm forgetting, but whatever they are, I'm going to try to get those tested out this week on the Pygame display. And that's all for me.
All right. That brings us to Hierophect to finish up status updates.
Okay. Last week, I worked on implementing the Neopixel on Arduino for the ESP32 using a peripheral on the ESP32 called RMT, standing for the Remote Control Peripheral, which is, as with a lot of stuff on the ESP, named like it's something really specific, but it's actually a very generic pulse editor, a pulse sending peripheral. So it basically makes the Neopixels work a lot smoother, results in fewer errors when you have big lists of them. So I worked on putting that on. It had a couple bugs that turned up at the beginning of this week, but otherwise went fairly smoothly. And I also submitted a PR for SPI peripheral or SPI slave behavior for microcontrollers, or for CircuitPython, which basically allows a CircuitPython device to act as an SPI peripheral that takes input and basically acts on the command of an SPI host or master device, which is something that I'm using for a personal tracking project. This week, I have been testing out the issue with the Neopixel strips on Arduino, because it turns out that issue is actually also on CircuitPython. So we're going to be resolving it there. And then also making it all work a little bit faster on both platforms. So Arduino and CircuitPython, we have a little bit extra latency if you're using multiple strips of Neopixels. So I've gotten some new Neopixel strips, and I'm going to try and speed that up a little bit. At Scott's request, I'm also going to be doing some reviews on ESP32 stuff this week that have come in from other contributors. And he was hoping I could check out his UDP implementation as well. So I'll be taking a look at all of that. And yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you. That concludes status updates, and we move to the final section called In the Weeds. This is a chance for some longer form discussion of anything that doesn't fit within the previous categories. It looks like we've got one item, so I will hand the talking stick back to Zoltan.
Thanks, Jeff. So I would just like to add a bit of background on what's going on in Microlab and what it can mean for CircuitPython. So one of the issues is the trade-offs that I'm trying to sort out. Basically, what makes Microlab a bit expensive in terms of flash space is mainly binary operators. So operators or functions where two ND arrays take place or are involved. Because then each binary operator actually has to be unwrapped into, in this particular case, 25 iteration loops, and that's not exactly cheap. One way around that is that one moves the if statement, so you can write out the loop, and then within the loop do something depending on what the binary operator requires. the upshot is that now in the loop you have an if clause, and that's going to slow you down. On the other hand, you have now a single loop instead of 10 times 25 or whatever, however number, whatever number you have for the number of binary operators. So basically, what this means is that at the expense of speed, you could gain on flash space, and this wouldn't influence the CircuitPython experience in the sense that from the Python side, everything will behave the same way. It will just be a bit slower. I still have to figure out how much slower, but this is going to be an option for smaller microcontrollers. The second is scalability and customization. So while I was rewriting the code, I actually made it such that you can now exclude every function on a case-by-case basis. So in the past, people had feature requests which I had to turn down because I thought that, well, if only one person is interested, then it's not worth it. But now I think I have a bit more freedom. I can implement whatever they want, and then if someone doesn't need a function, then it can be switched off in a single header file. So this is I think this should provide some flexibility in terms of what's included or what's implemented, and the inclusion is a different issue. You don't have to do that, and it brings me to a subject that was it has been floating for a while, and that's Numpy compatibility. So in CircuitPython you have submodules, and that's how you decide which function you want to have or which function you want to exclude. But I think that has its limitation. This approach has its limitations. Namely, if I want to add a new function on my side, then I still have to have feedback from CircuitPython, because it can happen that I insert a function in a particular submodule and it doesn't compile for a particular piece of hardware on your side. And I think that's a bit of a predicament, I would say. So in order to I was thinking that perhaps we could give up this notion of submodules without having to sacrifice this CircuitPython experience, which is so close to Scott's heart, and I understand that. I subscribe to that. That's absolutely no problem. But we could do it perhaps a bit differently, and here's my proposal. In Microlab now, if you query the version number, then you get something like what you have in the first snippet. So the version number, then -2D, which just means that this particular firmware version supports two-dimensional tensors, and -CPy, which means that it conforms to CircuitPython's standards, or it has these submodules. But this again, you still have the problem that if a new function is inserted, then the submodules might lose their meaning. And on the other hand, it also means that you have no Numpy compatibility, and this disturbs some people because they can't simply take a piece of code from a PC and run it on a microcontroller. They have to somehow translate it, and that's why some people requested this Numpy compatibility, which is actually already implemented. You don't have to switch it on. You can keep the CircuitPython promotion of submodules, but you can switch on the Numpy compatibility. If you still want to make sure that your code or whatever you want to achieve in your code runs with a particular version of the firmware, then what you could do is define a hierarchy of features, and then we could extend the version number with a single number. So then instead of what you had previously, you would have CPy-11 or whatever it is. And this number would tell you what's included in the firmware. So if you have a piece of code that requires features that are only in -12, then you could make sure that you are not trying to run that piece of code right at the moment of importing. I think this is just a mock-up, but something along the lines in the what's presented in the last snippet. You could simply check whether this last number is greater than whatever value you prescribe. So this would mean that you can then completely decouple microlab from CircuitPython in the sense that I do whatever I want, and then you can define your subset of functions, and I don't have to know about that. And it would also give you Numpy compatibility, and you wouldn't lose this CircuitPython experience. So you wouldn't run into problems with trying to using functions that are not in the firmware. And finally, one reason I think this could be better than the submodules is that I tried it out. If I strip everything and keep only the FFT routine, I singled out the FFT because Dan Harbert mentioned it to me once that Adafruit was trying to implement, or at least it was under discussion, implement an FFT library for CircuitPython. So if I strip everything and keep only the FFT, then I end up with a piece of firmware which is only 5 kilobytes bigger than CircuitPython itself. So that would mean that you could add FFT in a NumPythonic way to even the smallest microcontrollers, and you still wouldn't lose the CircuitPython experience. You just have to check at the moment of importing whether FFT is included, and then you can define your hierarchy in a way that FFT is on the lowest level, so it's included in all possible firmware versions. Well, these are my comments. I don't know if I expect any definite statement on your part. I think it was just a bit of background on what I am trying to do and how it could possibly be used in CircuitPython.
So, who wants to start?
I had one comment, is Dan. So you're proposing this hierarchy of, or really a sort of a monotonically increasing set of features, and
Right.
you designate that by a number. So
Right.
do you want to do that? I mean, an alternative is just if you import a module, you can check to see what's in it with the dir function.
Right. That's true. But actually, what's really costly is binary operators, and you might decide to get rid of the power operator or whatever it is that you are not going to need. And dir is not going to give you any information on which binary operators are included. On the other hand, so you could do something like what's described in the customization section of the manual. You can still figure out whether the power operator is included, but I think it's a bit of a bit hackish, I would would say. So I believe if you have this hierarchy, then it's actually up to you. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything.
Yeah.
I wanted to say that if you do this, then you can define your subset of features without me having to know anything about it. So that would actually give a complete decoupling between the two projects, or
Right. So what I'm thinking is, I'm not really arguing about the hierarchy business at all, or in any way. I was just wondering if there's an easier way to determine at runtime. Like, so it's true that the double underscore operators, you can't find them, right? You can't find underscore power or whatever it is.
Right.
So if suppose that was done as a, I don't know, as a bitmap, or as, I'm trying to think about something like dir. You could have like a pseudo dir that says, yeah, these things are there or not. And because I'm just worried about that if people want to mix and match this, there's this monetize. You have to know what number. You have to go look up the number of the feature set or something like that.
That's correct. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was just wondering if there's an easier way to determine, like if you just wanted to turn off a single operator or something, you'd have to come up with yet another number, and you were checking to see whether the feature sets are each one is a superset of the other one. But I could imagine that there are cases where you just want to mix and pick and choose things.
Right, that could be. I actually so I think this is a bit of a tricky business, because many things are implemented, many are not. But perhaps amongst those that are implemented, there are many that are never used, and I simply don't know. I don't know what people need and what people use. Perhaps someone asked for that once and I implemented it, but then the person went away and walked away, and then I don't even know that he's using it. The question really is, and it doesn't matter whether you have a hierarchy or submodules. The question really is whether you can define a reasonable subset of operators and functions that are used or can be used in a very broad context, and let the not so popular functions be in a submodule or higher up in the hierarchy. I don't know. It doesn't matter how we solve this problem, but I just don't know what's important. So, and this is why I singled out the FFT as advertisement. So you can get FFT for 5 kilobytes, actually less than 5 kilobytes, and I know that was one of your ideas, or you mentioned it.
I mean, the original motivation, the reason I got excited about MuLab was the FFT. Okay, so you were looking for an FFT, so I was like, oh great, and we get all this other stuff too. So exactly, yeah. Like that was like the original, like, oh wow moment.
So I remember. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so I all I have to say is I'm just worried that you're going to end up with a very complicated structure, which is going to require a lot of documentation, and I'm trying to think about how to do it in some way that is simpler, and I don't even know whether it's even worth checking. I mean, like the version number could actually be a concatenation of strings or something. I just whether it's worth doing this checking because if somebody's going to write a program to do that, or whether you just want to run the program and it'll fail or not. Okay.
But Scott doesn't want that, and I sort of understand it. But let me reformulate the question. Jeff mentioned once that on one of the boards, Microlab was disabled, and actually I was offended at that time.
Okay.
So microlab was disabled because it simply didn't fit the flash. Now the question is, if you could solve the problem that you have only FFT on this board, would you do that? Or would you say that, well, it just breaks the CircuitPython experience or whatever, and then let's just get rid of everything? So is the fact that you could have FFT on that single board, but not the whole thing, is it worth it? And I would argue that it's worth it. But I would also say that this is not. I'm not in the position to make a decision on this. I think this is something that you have to decide somehow whether it's worth it, and if it's worth, how you solve it. I was just perhaps trying to say that if there is a proposal how it could be solved, then I'm more than happy to insert the tools if any tools are necessary on my side into the code. That's
Okay, I understand the motivation now. I thought I didn't know where the motivation was coming from. Yeah. So I have nothing strong to say. I'd have to think about that right now. I was thinking more about the implementation of the technique. Yeah.
So,
I'm done, Scott. Really.
okay, that's fine. I don't think. I think one thing we have to keep in mind in terms of whether we have FFT in a build is whether we actually have anything worthwhile FFTing. Like the smallest boards, we may not actually have like audio input or output at all as well. So
Okay.
I think I like don't take it personally if the smallest of small boards don't have it, because they're just really constrained at this point. I think in terms of speed versus flash space, that is a trade that we were making at the very lowest end. So if there are knobs where we have the same APIs but they can be different speeds, to trade for flash size, like that's something that's interesting to us. So if you have those, that's great.
I'm working on that. So as I said, some of those still have to be implemented, but I'm working on that, and I think this is independent of CircuitPython. This is an idea that I would like to explore.
Okay. So we have a couple precedents for that already. Like we have a flag that allows us to like turn off optimizations for the garbage collector and also for the VM. So we have precedents for that. That's totally something that's interesting. And then my feedback on the version string thing would be that I don't think anybody's actually going to do that version string check. And I'm wondering why. Are you back?
Yeah, I should be back.
Okay.
I think I haven't heard the last two or three.
Okay. So
If you could use.
yeah, so I said that speed versus flash is really interesting. And then for the version string number, I would expect that people would not check it. It would only be a case where somebody tries to do something and their code doesn't run and you say, hey, can you print out the version number for me? I really still think submodules are the right way to go, and I wonder why you're switching to one monolithic module in the native core, because I imagine what you could do is you could have just a Python module that imports everything from all the individual modules to give you the NumPy experience of everything being in the same namespace. You know what I mean?
That's right. That's right. On the other hand, submodules have costs. So not too much, but if you have 10 submodules, that's going to add up to something like 2 kilobytes, I think. So the submodule itself has
2
to be stored in
kilobytes?
Flash. I think it's somewhere in the kilobytes range if you switch on all submodules.
Yeah, 50 bytes for one module doesn't sound like a whole lot. That sounds like a totally plausible amount.
50 times.
Times
50
10.
times 10. Okay, so perhaps half a kilobyte. I don't know, but there's some gain there. So and if on top of that you have to run a piece of Python code that's going to eat into the RAM. So I don't know, but I see your point. So don't get me wrong.
I mean, like the only cost you're gonna pay is the size of making dictionaries larger, right? Like for every name, you're gonna have a QString reference, and that QString's already gonna be inlined regardless. And then you're gonna have the pointer to the function as well. And I also get the impression that the scenarios where you want NumPy compatibility are scenarios on the higher end of the spectrum in terms of RAM and CPU speed.
Might be. Yeah,
I would expect. Yeah, I kind of wonder what. I wonder whether that cost is significant for those cases. Like I don't have a lot of insight into the other people that are coming to you and using Microlab.
I don't either. That's the problem.
Right. So but I guess I would just push back and say, like, is a Python file that just aggregates all the APIs back together to be like NumPy untenable? Like, is there a reason that doesn't work?
No, I don't think so. I think it's submodules that you want to enable, and you can compile the firmware with those submodules. What happens if I insert a new function into one of becomes larger, and you won't actually know why it has happened. So on the other hand, if you you can, of course, you can still switch. That doesn't speak against that. You still have the header file where each function can be switched of whether it's
You're cutting in and out for me.
Or part of a submodule. So in this sense, perhaps there is no difference.
You were breaking up. I kind of didn't get it as one full thought. Sorry.
Right. Okay. So what I wanted to say is that you can still disable individual functions in the header file, and it doesn't matter whether the firmware is NumPy compatible or CircuitPython compatible. So what I wanted to say is that if I add new functions, then you can still decide on your side whether you want to include that function.
Yeah, and
that will be part of that particular submodule.
Right. I mean, I think if your feedback is I'd like your side, you'd like to treat it as one monolithic module, and then on our side we have to split it up. Like, we can do that.
No, I don't think so. It's not worth it. So I mean, because what I have at the end of the source focus dictionary for that module, and then in the main file I have to have a switch whether I want NumPy compatible code or CircuitPython compatible code, and it's absolutely no problem. I think it would be really a disaster if you try to hack it on your side, not because you are incompetent, but because I think this is an extra effort that's not worth it. So it has to be handled on Microlab's side, I think.
Yeah.
And I have nothing against that. So if you wish to keep the submodules, then we go that way. It's absolutely no problem.
I mean, I believe it's the best way to
Okay.
do design like this, and I think it benefits other users besides your CircuitPython users. But I understand the argument that people coming from NumPy have extra work to do.
Right, but then if that concerns them, then they can simply switch or change a single switch in the header file and then compile the firmware for themselves. So I
Or-
think it's,
Or there's a numpy.py file that just imports everything and puts it where it would be for numpy.
that's also an option, right? Right.
And then you don't need to recompile.
Right. That's correct. Perhaps that's the best of both worlds.
I would suggest trying it before doing the version number thing.
Okay. Yeah.
That would be my
Great.
feedback.
Yeah. Well, I think that's those were my comments. You do whatever you would like to do, I will be working on these features. We'll see how it goes.
Jeff, do you have any feedback on this? Because you're doing more CircuitPython ULab stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been doing anything with Microlab lately. I'm certainly interested in looking at what are the options for the size optimization. Zoltan mentioned using an if statement. I also wondered about using function pointers. And then in a really weird world, it might work out to actually dynamically generate some code into RAM and then call that code. I don't know if there's enough similar code that you'd want to trade flash space for RAM space. And of course, then you become bound to running on ARM. You would, probably not go ahead and do that on the ESP32, for instance, in terms of code generation. So those are some of the things that come to mind there with those trade-offs. And I think you understand much better where the code size is coming from than I do just off the top of my head. Although Dan has done some really good work with looking at map files and figuring out where bloat is. So if map files or list files, anyway, that is a great thing to know about versus just recompiling and seeing how much it changes by. So definitely ask him about that.
Okay.
And then the last thing would be if you or Scott wanted to respond to Kevin Thomas's question, why NP in particular. I think it's wouldn't hurt to cover that. Zoltan, do you want to say why you chose to emulate or model after NumPy for Microlab?
Well, because I think it's a relatively well-known library for CPython, and I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. I wanted to re-implement it only. So I think that was the most obvious choice.
And I don't think any part of it is really directed at machine learning yet, is it?
No, Scikit has some machine learning sub-libraries or sub-modules, but I have never worked with them, so that's why this issue is a bit difficult, at least for me, because I don't even know where to start. And what they mean, I have no idea. On the other hand, I have the feeling that this is something that's quite expensive. So someone mentioned that, for example, gesture recognition could be done offline, and then you would have to upload only the routine. And I think gesture recognition is something that could be interesting for CircuitPython. Or many of the boards, but I don't quite know where to start. So it's a fun issue, I would say.
Yeah. So Kevin also asks, would a byte array work as well? And I mean, I think with the one-dimensional array in NumPy, it is really a lot like an array.array, right? Except you have these operations you can perform. Like you can't apply the sign function to an array or a byte array, but that's what Microlab is all about enabling.
Right, exactly.
All right. Well, if that's it, that will wrap it up for In the Weeds and the meeting. So let me move on to the last section of wrap up. This has been the CircuitPython weekly meeting for November 2nd, 2020. Please come visit us in the CircuitPython channel on the Adafruit Discord, adafru.it. If you'd like to be informed about future meetings, just ask us to make you a member of the CircuitPythonistas, and you'll get a couple of notifications a week on Discord. There's a notes doc to go with this meeting. If you got to the end without having the link to it, I apologize. It would have really helped you out. There is a meeting calendar, and there is just a lot more in the CircuitPython and Adafruit community. So we hope to see you in the future. Thanks everyone for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone.